You are tuned in to the Empowerment Hour podcast, your digital global classroom where individuals across all ages, backgrounds, and career levels tune in for guidance and motivation to live life on their own terms. It's where inspiring thought leaders, modern-day influencers, and social game changers come to discuss their own personal journeys and have real conversations about the journey to success. I am your host, Nancy Ruffin, and every week I bring you raw and unfiltered conversations about the obstacles we all encounter, the times we felt like giving up, and the things that keep us forging forward. It's where passion and purpose intersect. So if you're ready to start living on purpose, then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to another episode of the Empowerment Hour podcast. It is your host, Nancy Ruffin, aka the Purpose Professional, aka the Latina Oprah. In case you forgot, I am here. I am about claiming that throne because I have a vision of my life that is nothing short of amazing. And so if I know what I want that vision to look like, why not claim it, right? Why not claim it by associating myself with the person who, for me, epitomizes exactly how I want to position myself in business, in philanthropy, in my community, in politics. I mean, Oprah is the GOAT. So yes, if I am going to aspire to be like anyone, she is that for me. And I share that because when I first started calling myself the Latina Oprah, people would get really upset. And I never understood why. And then the more I thought about it, the more I realized is that people weren't mad at the fact that I was calling myself the Latina Oprah, but they were mad that I had the confidence, the audacity to even aspire or to believe that I could be as great as Oprah. And so really what that translates to is their own shortcomings within themselves, right? Because everything that people say or think about us or do to us is really a projection of their own reality. And so if people are hating on me or hating me or not liking me because of the fact that I call myself the Latina Oprah, that really is more a reflection on them and where they are within their own self-confidence and self-esteem than it has to do with me. And so frankly, I don't care. I don't care who likes it. I don't care who does like it. At the end of the day, I know what I'm capable of, and I have a vision of where I see myself. And really that vision is to supersede and to surpass what Oprah has done. But until I am able to accomplish that, for me, she is that barometer that I am aspiring to, because I have to have something to shoot for in order to surpass that. And so I guess when it relates to your own lives and the vision that you have for your, for yourself and for your goals and what you ultimately want your life to represent, what does that look like to you? Who within your realm of understanding has done or accomplished what you want to do, right? And not saying that you have to want to be them or to even aspire to be them, but look at them as a guide, as a blueprint on the things that you may have to implement in your own life to kind of get there. And this is something that I've applied in almost every area of my life, especially as it has applied to my career and business. I've spent the majority of my career in healthcare. I've been in healthcare for almost 20 years. And during that time, I've reported to different kinds of managers and leaders. And as I created my own leadership path, and as I started to develop my own identity as a leader, as a manager, as a quote unquote boss, I always looked to the leaders and managers that I had that inspired me, right? Because being a leader is different from being a manager or being a boss, right? Managers, all they really do is delegate work, right? They tell you this is what you have to do, and then they check up on you to see if it's done, and then that's pretty much it. But leaders there's so much more than that. Leaders are the ones who are also listening and watching, and they're taking in everything that those who report to them are doing, and then they're figuring out ways on how to get these individuals to do more, to be more, to aspire to more. And the way that you do that is by giving them autonomy over their work, not micromanaging them, trusting that the individuals you have hired to do their job are actually doing their job. And the way that you do that is that you set the highest expectations for them. And then you give them the opportunity to accomplish the goals that you have set before them and trust that they're going to do it. You know, a lot of times these managers feel like they have to be on top of their staff because their staff isn't going to do A, B, C, or D, or, you know, whatever it is. But the truth is that when you micromanage a person and you set your expectations low for them, they are going to function at the level that you expect them to function at. So if your expectation for them is that they're not going to complete their tasks on time, that they're not going to perform the way that they should, then that is exactly what they are going to give you, because you are not trusting or believing enough in them to expect more. You know, and I had this conversation the other day, and I work a lot with leaders out at the hospitals that are within the corporation that I work for. We oversee all of the New York City public hospitals. There's 11 acute care hospitals in total. We have a few diagnostic and treatment centers. We have tons of community health clinics. We're in schools. I mean, we're a huge health system. And so a lot of my job is really going to the hospitals and working with those who are in supervisory positions and manager positions, and making sure that collaboratively with their teams and with their staff, they are consistently meeting the financial targets that we have set as a corporation. And for me, my most successful sites or my most successful facilities are those facilities where the leaders are really leading and where they're involving their staff in the conversations, in the work, where there's transparency, where their input is valued and solicited. And so it's more of being a leader than it is being a supervisor or a manager. And it's also opening up those lines of communication where the people who report to you feel safe and feel confident enough that if they don't know something, that they can come to their supervisor or manager and ask the question and ask for help, and know that they're not going to be punished or penalized or ridiculed or made to feel less than. And so for me, back to what I was saying, when I was on my own leadership path, I always looked to the managers that I had that exhibited those kinds of qualities, the ones who inspired me, who pushed me to want to do more, right? Because when they expected more of me, I was more inclined to perform up to those expectations because I didn't want to let them down. I didn't want to betray the trust that they had placed in me with regard to doing my work. And so whenever I was given a task, because they trusted that I would be able to execute it exactly the way that they wanted, I made sure that I did that. and that I did it within the deadlines, and, I did it within the specs of the requirement of whatever the work was. And so when we're talking about, leaders and leadership and trying to figure out how to get the best out of our teams, I have one simple rule that I kind of tell the people that I work with, and that is you just treat your employees the same way you want your manager, your supervisor, your director to treat you. And it's really that simple. And when we walk in, to these spaces, and I think that this can really be applied to any area of our lives, right? Ultimately, we want to be respected, we want to be valued, we want to be seen, and we want to be heard. And that applies to business, personal life, friendships, relationships. That is all that anyone wants. And I think that when you have that, and when you maintain that, the relationship, no matter what it is, whether it's an employee-employer relationship, whether it's a personal relationship, a romantic relationship, when you have those elements, that relationship thrives. When it doesn't thrive is when one is trying to exert power over another. And so if you're trying to use your position as a form of power to get people to do what you want, then you're never gonna develop the best in a person. And I just kind of wanted to share that with you, because as we head into the work week, right, we're dealing with bosses. Some of us might be bosses. And so I really just want to give you something, to think about. And if you are a boss who micromanages and who feels like your employees can't be trusted, then take a step back and ask yourself, why is that? And maybe historically, the employee hasn't performed up to expectations, but then maybe you need to have a discussion with them, and maybe it has to be a different kind of discussion, right? And instead of speaking with them in a accusatory way, or in a way where they feel like they're being diminished, maybe you speak to them with an understanding ear, with a listening ear, with a non-judgmental ear, and really try to understand why the employee is functioning in the way that they do, right? And it could be something that has nothing to do with you or with the workplace. It could be something that's happening in their personal life, or baggage that they may be carrying from a past employer. I mean, we just never know until we start to have those conversations. And of course, there's always going to be those difficult employees that no matter what you do, you're just not going to get through to them. But for the most part, we each have the power to develop high-performing, high-functioning teams, as long as we see them as an asset to our business and to the corporation, instead of as a liability or someone we have to watch and monitor. And when you start treating people with respect, when you start acknowledging their contribution and the value that they bring, and setting expectations for them because you trust and believe that they are capable to do the work, 9 times out of 10, they will start to function at that higher level of expectation. And if you don't believe me, then I encourage you, I challenge you even to go and take a different approach with how you're leading your teams. And now, if you're an employee who's doing the bare minimum, ask yourself, is it because your employer is this way? Because they're micromanaging you? Because they might not believe that you can fulfill their expectations, right? And then ask yourself, well, what am I doing, or what have I not done that lends itself to this? And how can I change their perception of me? How can I be a better employee? How can I perform better so that I have more autonomy over the work that I do, so that I am trusted more and there are higher expectations set for me. It's a two-way street. But in any case, I digress. I hope you guys had an amazing weekend. I absolutely had a fun-filled Saturday and Sunday. I didn't rest, so I am tired, but it was truly amazing. On Saturday, I hosted the event that I collaborated with my girl Stefanie, the Life Architect, BLC New York, and Cythia Branch, aka Therapy with Cythia on Instagram. And the event was Boricua, Morena, colorism and sisterhood, a conversation about race, ethnicity, and how we identify. And guys, I will tell you that this event was nothing short of amazing. It was everything that we had envisioned it to be. I think it even probably surpassed or exceeded our vision, just because of the dynamic, I think, that exists between myself, Stefanie, and Cythia. It's really difficult sometimes when you are used to producing your own events and having full control and really being the only one to make the decisions, and then you're also responsible by yourself for the execution. When you shift that and when you collaborate with not one but two other women, first of all, that can be scary as hell, right? Because you are placing or you're relinquishing some of your power and your control. And, you have to now put yourself in a position where you have to compromise. But I would say that this experience overall, it was just painless. It was stress-free. And I think that a part of that really has to do with how aligned Stefanie, Cythia, and myself are with ourselves. We understand well who we are. We understand our strengths. We understand our weaknesses. And we all are very self-aware. And so what we don't do is project our own fears or insecurities onto each other. But instead, what we did is we came together in a way that really allowed each of us to have an equal voice on the team. And it was amazing. And I think that it showed in the execution of our event. It showed with the feedback that we have been getting since the event. The fact that we really love, admire, and respect one another, I think was also very visible throughout the event. We each shared the stage. I never felt like I was being overpowered or as if my voice wasn't being heard, and I don't believe that the other women felt that way either. I think that we all felt confident in ourselves and in our voices and in what we were contributing to the conversation. And this was a very difficult topic to talk about. I mean, anything that has to do with race and identity, especially in this country, isn't easy. We all come, we walk into the space with our own experiences, our own biases, our own prejudices. And sometimes it's really hard to just listen and understand and not judge. And we really set some ground rules before the event started because we wanted everyone to feel safe in sharing their own experiences. And one young woman, shared how she just recently discovered that she is part Cuban, and that part of her genetic makeup was never discussed in her family. In fact, she expressed that it has been actively denied and not accepted, and she only learned about her Cuban ancestry after her grandfather passed away. And she was very emotional because she felt that he was the only connection to the Cuban side of her. And now that he has passed, she has no one to ask questions or to talk with about that. And it was really rough. It was a lot of stuff that was happening in the room. We had other guests, a mother and a daughter, who were talking about their own experiences with race. And the daughter was saying how she is Puerto Rican and Black, yet her mother, who is all Puerto Rican but of the Black race, she's a Black Boricua, never accepted or even acknowledged her Blackness. And I think that it was a breakthrough even for them, because they both, first of all, were speaking about their own experiences, and then that it really allowed them to see each other's perspective. And there were just so many breakthroughs that were happening during the event. One man actually shared how he is, I think he's from Nigeria. He said he was from Nigeria. Shout out to our loyal listener and supporter, Owulabi, aka Black Man, who I know tunes in every week to the Empowerment Hour podcast. So thank you. But he joined us and he was sharing his own experience and how subconsciously, how he does look at darker skinned women, but he is attracted to or drawn to the lighter skinned women. And he wasn't sure where that stems from. And so I think that this event and this conversation has really opened up an area for him where he can now go and do some self-work and self-evaluation and see where that preference stems from, what the root of that is. And I think for Stefanie, Cythia, and myself, that was really the hope that we had for this event, that people would come in, that some stereotypes, of course, would be dismantled and, kind of shut down, and that we educated, because we did, we broke it down, certain terms and what they mean, because there's a lot of confusion behind the term race, ethnicity, nationality, all of those terms, though sometimes they're used interchangeably, have very different meanings. And so we broke all of that down. We gave people an opportunity to understand what the difference was. But we also wanted this event to be the beginning of helping ourselves unlearn some of the things that we have traditionally been taught, right? And a part of unlearning is becoming aware of the things that are not correct, right? Or trying to identify where some of our biases and prejudices stem from. Because until we understand where they come from, we can't start to heal them or move past it or correct, our thinking in that way. And so I think that the event really lended itself to educating people, to listening without judgment, to really trying to understand someone else's experience, and not invalidating their experience, right? Letting them know, not only do I hear you and I understand you, but your experience is valid, even though it's not my own shared experience. We also had a white woman in the audience. She's a white Cubana, and I loved that she was there, and I loved that she shared her own story, because, she is a very proud white Cuban, and that was what she said. And she has every right to be proud of who she is and how she identifies. But she says that some of the challenges that she has faced within her own community is that, her family and friends have said to her, oh, well, why are you trying to be white? Look at you, you want to be white. But the reality is that she is white. That is her race. She is a white Cuban. Her ethnicity is Cuban, but her race is white. And one of the things that I shared, during the event was that, unfortunately, in this country, we have allowed for certain terms to be synonymous with certain groups. And so what I mean by that is that, for example, in the United States of America, when we talk about being Black, or when we talk about a Black person, the term Black has historically been applied solely to African Americans. And so a lot of Black Latinos reject the term Black in this country because to them, when they hear the word Black, it's automatically synonymous with African American, and for them, they are not African American. It's not who they are, so it's not how they're identifying, so they're not claiming the term Black. But the reality is that African American is an ethnicity just as Puerto Rican or Cuban or Dominican. It's an ethnicity, right? And so Black is not solely synonymous with African American. And in fact, Blackness spans the entire globe because we know that there are Black African Americans, there are white African Americans when we look at skin tone, right? There are Black Cubans, Black Dominicans, Black Puerto Ricans, Black Mexicans. We know this because they exist within our own family structures. And so the same holds true when we talk about whiteness, right? And the white race in this country, being white has become synonymous with being Caucasian or Anglo-Saxon. But the truth is that, like Blackness, whiteness also spans the globe. So we know that there are white Puerto Ricans, and there are white Cubans, and there are white Dominicans, and there are white Mexicans, and so the way that we start to dismantle some of this is by educating not only ourselves, but then educating others when they say things that are inaccurate. And I know that we don't feel like we need to defend our identities, but sometimes it's not about defending more than it is about educating. So if someone says you're not Black, right, then that's your opportunity to have the conversation with them. And then you ask them, why do they believe that you are not Black? Right? And if they say, well, because you're not African American, that is when you educate them. Right? And that is how we start to dismantle some of what we've learned and what we have traditionally passed on generation to generation to generation. In the end, it starts with us. And not saying that we are going, to dismantle all of the preconceptions that arise out of colorism. We're not going to dismantle racism and prejudice, overnight or even within our lifetime, right? We may not see that happen, but if we start educating ourselves and educating our children and educating our grandchildren, then they will pass on that information generation to generation. And then ultimately we will get to a point in the time of existence where we may not be faced with a lot of the challenges that we are faced with today. So I guess, with that said, I just want to thank everyone who came out to our very first colorism, and sisterhood event. It was the first of a 3-part series that we have committed to. So part 2 will be coming in early 2019 in the form of a webinar. And I encourage you guys, if you're not already subscribed or following me, Cythia, and Stefanie, I encourage you to follow us now. So head over to your Instagram, head over to I am Nancy Ruffin, BLC New York, Therapy with Cythia, click that follow button, then make sure you head over. And you're probably here now because you're listening to the podcast, but if you are a loyal listener of the podcast, I encourage you, I implore you, I ask very nicely of you to make sure that you are subscribed, that you have left us a rating and a review. That really is what is going to propel the Empowerment Hour into what it is, into what it could be. And I cannot do that without your support, without your recommendation, without you sharing the podcast within your networks. And I just want to add, because this was brought to my attention during the event, that while in the beginning, when I initially started the podcast, we were very female focused. When I started looking at my numbers, when I started looking at my listenership, what I realized was that I had a great percentage, a good percentage of my listeners who were men, in spite of the fact that it was a women-focused podcast. And what I realized was that men need these messages as well. And they don't have very many options to turn to. And so I have expanded the Empowerment Hour podcast to be inclusive of men. So if you haven't noticed, in our logo, we are no longer calling out the her in Empowerment Hour. It is now strictly the Empowerment Hour with no HER in the middle of that. And that was very intentional, because as I grow, within the work that I'm doing, as the podcast grows, I don't want to exclude anyone who needs the messages that we are sharing here weekly on the podcast. I want men to feel included. I want to hear your voices. I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear what are some of the topics that you want me to talk about. What are some of the issues or challenges that you're faced with that are not being addressed in other forums? I want to be able to provide that for you all, because one of the things that was very apparent at the colorism event was that men deal with a lot of these very issues. With the colorism thing, when we're looking at men and we look at dark-skinned men versus light-skinned men and how they're portrayed, in the media and in movies, and those who are getting like the starring roles and those who society says are more attractive, men have the same issues and challenges. And so I want the Empowerment Hour to be that platform that you turn to when you need guidance, when you need inspiration, when you need motivation. I want us to be the podcast of choice. And so that is why I have expanded into including men. So if you're a man that's listening out there, I ask you to please make yourself known, leave us a comment, leave us a rating. If you want, you can slide up in my DMs just for this one time. Let me know that you're listening. Let me know what you love about the show. Let me know what you think is missing from the show. And I will do my best to provide you with, whatever it is that you need. So I guess with that, I will end this episode of the Empowerment Hour podcast. Thank you for tuning in. As I say every week, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and go out there and crush those goals.